Welcome to Y11 Audio. I'm Alex Alvarado. Thank you for listening. We have one more positional preview episode to finish up the offensive week here for the first installment of Prevews Weeks. Talked a whole bunch of offense this week. Next week's going to be a whole bunch of defense. Today, we're going to focus on two position groups, two groups of guys that can do two different things. We ran through quarterback, ran through offensive line, we ran through the receivers. What about the running backs? What about the tight ends? These are guys that either have the responsibility of being lead blockers, have it be right next to the tackle or right in the backfield to pick up some blitzes from multi-directions. Guys that can take the handoff, guys that can, take the quick pass. There's a lot of responsibility that's riding on these running backs and these tight ends. Excited to get to it. Let's focus on the running backs. Just remembering what these position rooms kind of looked like and how they found themselves into how they're molded today. If we go back to 2019, when nobody who's able to carry the rock today was playing back then for them. Shaq Van was leading the way. He was finishing up his college career. Now he's coaching over at Ball State. Remember him? Guys like Breck Turner, Willie Parker, Jairus Grissom, they were still around being flushed out because 2020, that's when things were very new. That's when there was a whole bunch of freshmen at running back. It was a very new room. Samson Evans transferred in from Iowa after he spent, was it 1 or 2 years there? And he was a former quarterback for his high school state-winning program. Samson Evans, Darius Boone, they led the way in the shortened 2020 season with DJ Smith from Texas. Kind of in the wings, never really made it in. Then once 2021 rolled around, Juwan Hamilton, a graduate transfer from James Madison, he had come in, had some nice explosive plays. It was him and Darius Boone leading the way with Samson Evans still kind of hanging back, getting some cameo appearances, but he was third in running backs when it came to attempts. Then 2022, Juwan Hamilton goes out. Samson Evans is ready to be the guy. Then Jaylon Jackson from Lamar, little 5'6", faster than lightning kind of dude, comes in, just really, really takes this offense into a different dimension with so many other things that were working right because Darius Laster was doing well on the outside. There were a group of receivers that were reliable, so there was some dependable pieces already while they were also trying to figure out the quarterback situation with Taylor Powell and a very young Austin Smith at the time, right? But Jaylon Jackson, his presence in the offense was something that was really, really needed. Eastern kept trying to find those home run hitters, guys that could run just super duper fast. Juwan Hamilton had some speed to him, but Jaylon Jackson was definitely a difference maker that, ghosts of him are going to be chased. I shouldn't say ghosts of him are going to be chased, but there's going to be ghosts of him. They're going to be remembered for a while, and ghosts of what he was able to do on offense, running the ball as a receiver and in the special teams unit. He was a guy that was super duper useful for a team that, it's fortunate when it can get a guy that can do one thing super duper well. And that guy in his very undersized body, for only 2 years, unfortunately, would have loved to have him around for this year too. But for him to do as well as he could have done over the time that he did, that even without him inspires some confidence because that shows hey, with a guy like that who wasn't the most, recruited guy out of high school, wasn't the most sought after kind of guy through the transfer portal, guys like him that can come into the fold and just produce, be as fast as they are, and for him to be as springy as he is, not let, wear and tear bother him all too much. Jaylon Jackson was a really reliable guy. And then behind them, really, last year, Dante McMillan was a first-year transfer from Weber State. Elijah Jackson Anderson was a signee that was developing, and he was kind of, getting a little bit of time on the field, right? Like he caught the one touchdown pass from Samson Evans out of the Wildcat formation. So he was already getting acclimated into super unique parts of the playbook. So those two guys, plus Bryson Moss was there, but now he's gone. Those two guys that didn't get much playing time now, they're leading the depth chart this year. Dante McMillan, Elijah Jackson Anderson, with a couple of guys that are right behind them, not listed, but I'll just mention them now. Dion Brown, who signed with the team last year and was just redshirting. Then Delbert Mims, who is an incoming graduate transfer from NC State. Those two guys, I'm not going to assume that like a quote unquote thunder and lightning, like remember like the old like when the Chargers still had Philip Rivers, yeah, I said Ridgers, like Philip Rivers and Aaron Rodgers, just combine their last names. Anyways, think of stereotypical thunder and lightning guys that are like huge, big booming dudes, and then like the little pew. Not so much of what, I mean, kinda what Evans and Jackson was. Obviously, one was faster and one was like bigger and stockier. But I didn't really think of them like that just because they weren't used like that, you know. But if we can just like take your understanding of what thunder and lightning means in a running game, Dion Brown and Delbert Mims, they would offer that. I don't know how much or what, you know. Let me just back up for a second. Let me just give you like a quick overview of like what I'm looking at for this roster and then just kind of read through it. But knowing what we know of like what this running back room has looked like from 2019 through current, it's all hands on deck, right? There were some reliable pieces. There was a time where freshmen, you know, got into the fold. They fought their way up. They graduated. Some of them transferred out. Some didn't. There was some good couple of years. And now a lot of those useful pieces that we know and love and remember from the last few years, they're all gone. So now it's time for EMU to, you know, whatever was developed last year, let's see what you have. But generally, there's no experience to lean on in terms of like returning Eagles that, you know, carried the ball 20 times a game last year. That just doesn't exist on this team. So now it's going to be an all hands on deck approach for these running backs. Even though we're saying that on paper, Dante McMillan and Elijah Jackson Anderson are the listed starters on the two deep, with Dion Brown and Delbert Mims unlisted, but in my mind, like the backups, like the presumptive running back 2.1 and 2.2, right? You get what I'm going at. There's not one go-to guy. It's going to be four guys that are just going to be like itching for their playing time, itching to finally, you know, make some noise. Yeah, sure, there's a couple of underclassmen there, but McMillan, Mims, those are two older guys that really want to finish out their careers on like super high notes. So I don't think I have to go through too much of reading through this roster, but we're just going to do it anyways. Elijah Jackson Anderson, again, in-state kid from Flint, class of 2022 signee, has been in the system for a little bit, hasn't played too much, got in a bunch of games, but not recording a bunch of stats, right? But now it's his time to really shine and like just see where he's at in his development. But Dante McMillan was a guy that played for a few years at Weber State, was never truly the go-to running back. Had to split a lot of carries with other running backs on the team, but he was an all Big Sky running back in his time with the Wildcats. So I was kind of surprised that he didn't play as much as he, you know, like I thought he was going to get more playing time last year, but also with an offense that didn't really go anywhere, it was kind of hard to see him getting even like, it's hard to give guys breathers when they're already on the sideline. So his playing time was definitely hindered from last year, but you know, that definitely means that he didn't take many hits last year, right? So they both played last year, but not a whole bunch. Guys that returned from last year's roster didn't play at all. Dion Brown, the guy like we just said, class of 2023 from St. Louis, Kirkwood High School. Little pop quiz action for Deion Brown. Do you know who his high school coach was? Do you know? I know you've heard of it. If you're as old as me, you've definitely heard of who his coach was. Jeremy Maclin. That's right. Jeremy Maclin is his head coach from high school. Pretty sweet, right? Joey Matord joined last year from Heartland as a preferred walk-on. Delbert Mims, like we said, he transferred in this year from NC State. Let me look up his stats really quickly. I probably should have had those up. And remember, what we said about with Porter Rooks, who also comes in from NC State as a graduate transfer. He thought he was going to get, a bigger role on his team as a receiver and more of an air raid look. It just wasn't the case. But for Mims, I think he did get more opportunities. Was a consistent guy on the field. This stats page is saying that he played in one game in 2019, but pretty much every game, at no fewer than 11 games played his freshman year in 2020, and played a bunch all the way through, but didn't get a whole bunch of carries. Got it 6 carries in 2021, 27 in 22, and then 96 carries in 2023. Finished with 442 career yards on 100 and let's call it 30 attempts, 8 scores, and they were all made last year. Just definitely one of those guys that, hey, I've been developing at a Power 5 school for a long time. Now is my time to get it done. So let's do it. Let's do it up here. A couple of freshmen are on the team this year, but I just don't, this is a difficult position group to, just speaking through the history of the Creighton era. Good luck getting on the field as a freshman at this position. It doesn't happen very often. Usually there's a redshirt year or two required for guys like this, but it's like a skilled offensive line room essentially, just in terms of how long it takes for guys to get from high school to field at this position group. It's tough, and there's not usually any more than 2 of you on the field at once. So JT Bronow, I shouldn't say Bronow because his name is actually kind of backwards. It's spelled Bronaugh, and I want to say Bronow, but it's Bronow. JT Bronow, from Florida, 3-star recruit. I don't really have too much to say on him other than just watching his tape. You know who he reminds me of? And this is just from a tape watching perspective. Do you know who he reminds me of? And it's unfortunate because the guy he reminds me of didn't get too much playing time while he was here, but I definitely thought he could have been something really good. Maybe Bronow could be the guy that I thought this player would have been. Breck Turner. There's a lot of Breck Turner in his game. Just watch their highlights, side by side and see if you agree with me. Javen Norman, preferred walk-on this year from Springfield, Ohio. His brother Javian. It's going to be really tough. Javen and Javian. You ever think if they mom or dad was Javian, get over here, the wrong one came over there just because they thought they were yelling at them? I don't know. Their names are way too close. But he comes in as a preferred walk-on. Just to add some competition in that room. A few questions, and then we're just going to switch over to tight ends. Over-under. We're not going to do too much betting here, but over-under. I'm setting the over-under on the highest individual rushing mark from any one rusher on this team. Will it get done? Will it get done? I'm setting the over-under, you tell me, at 700. Is the leading rusher on this team going to reach 700 yards this year? Now, I'm placing the number at 700 for a few reasons. One, 700 was not reached last year. So if 700 is reached this year by any one individual, obviously that's a step in the right direction. That means we're topping what Samson Evans was able to do, who finished with 635 yards last year. Not to say that that's Evans' fault, right? That's not placing everything on one. When we talk about the running backs, we're talking about the offensive line ahead of them, opening up holes, making opportunities happen, such forth, right? We already talked about the offensive line. That's kind of why I staggered these positions the way that I did this week. Kind of glad I did that, honestly. But if you remember, Jaylon, when everything was good, everything was peachy dory in 2022. Samson Evans, 1,000-yard rusher, 1,166 yards, 15 scores. All told throughout history, like he ended up breaking the school record in touchdowns made. So, sure, he's going to have like some shoes to fill in that regard. But immediately, is there any one player who's going to be able to be the guy down in and down out? I don't know if this is going to be a position group where one guy will get, 200 carries or 150 carries and everybody else is just taking like, significantly fewer amounts of carries throughout the season. It's going to be hard to see how that works out. It's going to require a ton of creativity, but, it's going to require the right kind of balance too. But still, 700 yards. I think a lot of these guys are capable of doing it. McMillan and Mims, I definitely see them as guys that, they could do it if everything works out right. But Mims especially, we just haven't really seen it out of him yet. Even though, and by we seeing, I'm not saying that we pay attention to NC State, let alone Weber State football, but the royal we have seen McMillan do it before. When he was with Weber State, his last year there, 801 yards rushing, 6 touchdowns scored on 130 carries. So definitely doable without him being like, the workhorse back. I don't think that any of these guys are coming into the situation thinking that, EMU needs a new like Ontario Brown at NIU style running back, a guy that can take 40 beatings a game and still come away with 200 yards on the ground or 300 yards on the ground, whatever the case may be, because Eastern's just different. They share the ball more. So if anybody's going to get 700 yards, that means that, one, they're still sharing the ball probably, but two, somebody's getting some big plays out of this and that they're finding some room out of this new looking offensive line. And if we can reach, I shouldn't say we, but if this running back room can find a guy who can, 700 is a kind of low number if like everything's going super duper well, but 700 is a good benchmark number to be at, to know, hey, we're moving in the right direction. We're passing last year's marks at a good enough rate. And if we're finding ourselves in a situation where that 700 mark by the best running back on this team, whoever it may be, if we're clearing that before bowl season, if we're clearing that before like late November, that's an optimistic place to be at. And that would definitely add to the balance that's required to open up the pass game, so on and so forth, and even open themselves up for receiving opportunities as running backs. So 700, that's the over-under I'm placing the highest rushing mark at for this team out of one rusher. How does EMU go about replacing two very useful and two differently used running backs? Like I said, it's just don't chase ghosts, but just know that the ghosts are there. Say hi to them when you walk past them in the hallways, but don't chase them. You don't have to chase the ghosts of Jaylon Jackson and Samson Evans just because, those two guys are no longer there. And when I say that they're useful in more ways than one, I already went through the gamut of like Jaylon Jackson, right? Super duper fast, rushed a ton, kick returns like crazy, had like his first year with Eastern had 2 kick returns where they were for 87 and 89 yards, like ridiculous stuff, man. And then Samson Evans, of course, for as long as he was able to hold up, staying in games and continually taking more beatings out of that position, it's a skill. It's definitely a skill. To have over 500 carries for your career, over 2,000 yards, 41 touchdowns, for him to not only be that, to try to be as much of a workhorse back as he could be, but for him to also be like the lead back out of like the Wildcat and to, be 6 for 6 passing, 5 of them scores. Dude, that's hard to do. And like that definitely requires good coaching, not just to get them prepared for that, but for them to, for them to be able to continually execute differently year in and year out, and to know when to bust out the Wildcat, when to effectively get Jaylon Jackson comboed out of the running back position into a slot receiver. All of that takes some creativity, not just on a skill level from these running backs, but creativity on a skill level mentally for these coaches. And so how are they going to use these new chess pieces that they haven't played with before? We knew what we were getting out of Evans and Jackson in 2023. They didn't have the season that they wanted to for a myriad of reasons. And now you lose those chess pieces. You have guys that you've seen in practices before. But how do we dial up the plays to set these guys up for success that Elijah Jackson Anderson's good at, that Dante McMillan's good at, that Deion Brown's good at, Because they're going to have their differences. Some of them are going to be fast. Some of them are going to be strong. We can compare their speed and their strength to those guys that left, but they're going to be different. They're just going to be different guys. They're going to be guys with different minds and different attitudes. So how does it all work, and what does it look like? Sliding over to tight ends to finish up the offensive previews, there's really only one guy that has to be replaced this year, and that's Andres Poski, who transferred out to Arkansas. German transplant, one of the international players. A lot of the international guys don't transfer out like that, so for him to get into the SEC is, selfishly for Eastern, stinks. Looking out for that kid, that's a dope opportunity. Good luck to you, man. That is really cool. Like, I got nothing bad to say. Like, I hope you tear it up. Still, you lose the one guy. Thinking about the rest of the tight end room, again, just like throughout the past few years of history, through the COVID years, we're going to start at 2021 because Bryson Cannon and Thomas Odukoye, who played through COVID, before COVID, were still around. Two junior college products. One was an obvious blocker. One was obviously a really good receiver without any gloves out there. But both of them left after 21. Gunnar Oaks, who, was the last guy standing, essentially. He was the leading tight end in 2022. Had some good catches and was like a halfway decent, reliable receiver in that bowl season. 2023 rolls around. It's Jere Getzinger's turn, in-state product. There's a lot of guys around him. Poski, he was coming into his second year with the team. Blake Daniels, he was developing as a former, is Davenport Division II? I think it's Division II. Blake Daniels was a converted, really tall quarterback from Davenport who was bulking up and all that stuff through 2022 and finally got to play legitimately as a tight end in 2023. Max Reese, CJ Horton, they were guys that were also coming into or CJ Horton was new. Max Reese was in his second year with the team. But Max Reese, a receiver in high school, learning how to play tight end. CJ Horton was a former walk-on receiver at Kansas State, then went JUCO, and obviously taking that same development route in his 1 year at Eastern before he left. But now, Max Reese, third year with the program, that converted receiver who was doing so well. Funny story, actually. He grew up in Chicago, did super well, was played on a high school team where they had like a handful of guys, especially on that offense, who ended up playing D1, going to FBS programs. They won a state championship. It was their first in school history. He broke a whole bunch of school records to get there. But my favorite funny story when it comes to Max Reese is that his dad actually, once upon a time, back when he was a young boy playing high school football, intercepted a pass from none other than Chris Creighton. Grew up in or around Seattle, let's say the Seattle area. But yeah, that's just a fun story that Max Reese shared with me a few years ago, talking to him before he enrolled at Eastern. But yeah, Max Reese, who now they all get to go on a plane together, go to play at Washington. Wouldn't this be a great time for Max Reese to just like have a coming out party in front of his dad's old friends at Washington Stadium? I don't know if that's all going to happen, but that'd be a fun setting to do it at, right? Okay, Max Reese, converted wide receiver. Blake Daniels, converted quarterback. Jere Getzinger still around. A tight end, right? He's football. Like, just Jere Getzinger, and I mean this in the best way possible. Like, having interacted with him a couple times, like in press conferences, I didn't get to go to media day, but I did get to watch him be interviewed by ESPN. Man, he is such a football player. Like, in the most, I don't know, man, just like in his interactions, he just walks and talks and like moves like a football player. You know, a lot of football players are just like super duper, like just have a certain charisma, or like the way that they like have a natural ability to just like fit in with the media, or if there's like a microphone in front of them. Yeah, I just think like Jerry is like the most football guy ever in front of the microphone. Just the most. So like he is just straight up a tight end for real. But I think like out of high school, at least by 24/7, like they marked him as a defensive end. I don't know. Still, those are going to be the three main guys that are going to be leading this position group. They have different abilities, right, when it comes to blocking, running, receiving. Blake Daniels is just the tallest of them all. Jere Getzinger, he is not doesn't have the best hands out there. Didn't come into the fold because of his hands. But he caught a game-winning touchdown pass in overtime against Akron. So that's kind of cool. But Jere Getzinger, he comes back for his final year. Max Reese, he comes back. I'm the most Michigan person ever. Max Reese, he comes back. Blake Daniels, he'll be back too. Guy that didn't play last year, signed with the team, but didn't play, Gabe Hoffman. He's been developing a little bit, also from the Washington area. Some transfers. Actually, there's really only one, but I guess we can say two names here, because Jonathan Odom from Florida, he was supposed to come in, did come in during the winter, practiced with the team through the spring, but was medically disqualified, so he's not going to be able to play this year. He's not even with the team anymore. Hans Lillis from Boston College, he comes in with 2 years remaining. Not the biggest receiver either. Class of 2020, was a 3-star guy out of Pennsylvania, but only played in, I shouldn't say only, but played in 21 games. He played in 20 games at Boston College. 1 catch in 2022, mostly special teams in 2023. Obviously, I'm not going to change, the trajectory there. I would assume that that's going to be the new case here. But what did I tell you with Jere Getzinger? Hans Lillis, it's not like he's not going to get a pass. Well, maybe he won't. I don't know. But if he does, if he even gets 1 or 2 passes thrown at them, it's going to be when you least expect it. He might be that guy that, Jere Getzinger, if he's able to get teams to just assume that it's going to be a run play every time he's out there, and they just like play the blitz when he's actually going out for a pass and it leaves him wide open, that's a great thing for him. That means he's been doing his job right. Hans Lillis, maybe that's going to be the same trajectory here where, he's out there. That's a key for the defense is going to be a run. Nope. I'm over here in the flats. I can catch a pass too. I'm not inept. I'm a good football player. So maybe that could be it. Maybe that's going to be when you see some passes thrown his way. I don't expect it to be any more passes thrown towards Max Reese. Don't expect it to be any more passes thrown towards Blake Daniels. And I don't expect him to get any more targets than Jerry either. Couple of freshmen to get to, maybe just one actually. Caden Vanderbush. I can't say it. Caden Vanderbush, 3-star tight end, 6'5", 200 pounds. Just looking at his tape really, really quickly, looks like it's going to take a minute for him to see the field. If it took these other guys like Reese and Daniels to see the field, wouldn't expect Vanderbush to see the field instantly either. He's a guy, just watching him, he was obviously a wide receiver in high school, but played so much, receiver out there as a 6'5", freak out there. Like, it's impossible not to play wide receiver at the high school level like that. But it's also like, I don't know, you're not learning to be a college tight end with every huge reception that you get out of there. Sure, you're growing as a receiver in that regard, and you're becoming a better runner perhaps, but that's not the game that he's going to be forced to play through his college years for as long as he's at Eastern. So would expect a couple years out of him before he really sees the field with any significance. Braden Locks, I'm not sure. He signed with the team in December. He's not on the roster right now. I'm not going to act like I know what his situation is there. I don't know if it's going to be like a gray shirt option and he'll be back later. His Twitter profile looks like he's still going to be at Eastern, so I don't really know, but that's just online. It's not a real thing. But still, talking about guys that, Eastern brings in and they're on a certain kind of trajectory because, they can fit one of three molds. They're a converted receiver, they're a converted quarterback, or they're a football guy like Jere Getzinger. I guess Hans Lillis we can throw in there too, just guys that just want a football. Braden Locks, I should say, Locks. Braden Locks, he falls into the converted quarterback category. Still 6'3", 215 pounds, so some projection there. But it doesn't really project anything if you're not on Eastern's roster at the moment. Don't know what that means going forward. Few things to finish up on. Open question with Jere Getzinger, and this is like a hopeful, optimistic question. Hey man, what kind of season will he have to finish up his college career? He is right, like not the kind of guy that got a bunch of offers out of high school, didn't come from a big high school in the first place, isn't the most skilled, most talented guy, but has definitely worked for everything that he does have over his Eastern career, is somebody that, this team can like really rally around just because of the work ethic that he's put in just to get onto the field. Not to say like nobody's worked to get on the field and that he's so much more special than anybody else, but he is that prototypical like, hey, I didn't have it easy and I'm still out here getting it done. They're still counting on me in, unique ways. So Jere Getzinger, especially if he has like a little bit more of an expanded role in the passing game, I'm curious to know what that looks like. Curious to know if he's the guy that, that gets run behind when it comes to all these big plays out of these new running backs. Is he going to be like the leader on these pitch plays and so on and so forth? What kind of season is he going to have? Is he going to be the guy that, nobody saw being like an NFL caliber anything for years, and then holy crap, what a senior year you had. Maybe you're a guy that, could be a late round option in the upcoming draft. That's coming up very soon. Like the last draft, the 2024 draft was way more recent than the one that's going to be coming up. But anyways, what kind of year is he going to have? How strong of a season can he finish out on? It's been a blast just watching him throughout the years get to this point. So he'll be fun to watch. The Blake Daniels experiment, obviously super duper huge. Would have loved to see him get more opportunities in the pass game last year. I'm not sure how much opportunity, like how many more passes are the wide receivers that don't have as much experience as at this point Blake Daniels and Max Reese have. Like how many more passes are they going to get than the tight ends? Because the tight ends room is on paper pretty good, pretty reliable. Wouldn't be surprised if they were a safe bet for a lot of Cole Snyder passes this year. So the Blake Daniels experiment, guy who is like 6'100", what does his, converted development from quarterback to tight end finally look like this year? if the pass offense is just like more improved, like I'd like to see him get more opportunities. What does that finally look like? SOS for Max Reese. This is something I already wrote on the newsletter at ipsy11.com, but Max Reese, third year converted wide receiver who did really well for himself in the high school ranks out of the Chicago area, like I said. But it's guys like him who have the resume that they have coming into the situation, guys who are already super skilled receivers who just need to learn how to play tight end at the college level. I think he did pretty well for himself debuting last year. Now I'd love to see way more of it. I don't know if he'll end up leading the position in targets or anything like that, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was like a top 3 receiver on the team either, if all goes as well. But I already wrote it, so I'm just going to say it here. It's go time for Max Reese. It is go time. Because this offense, it's going to need some breakout performances from a lot of spots, right? Like, we're looking to see who's going to come through at the X at receiver, see who's going to be the most skilled hands and best feet out there for somebody to stretch the field. But we need some close options too. Guys like Max Reese, I've been circling his name for a minute, and this is just the kind of year where I'm like, you know what? Redshirt sophomore, guy with as much talent as he is, like, why wait until his senior year to say that it's time for him to have a breakout year? I say, let's do it now. I say now is the time. All right. Thank you for listening to these past 4 episodes to open up Prevews Weeks. Got one more before we get to the weekend, and then we'll have defense next week.